Hello and welcome. My name is Kathy Agnew. I'm the chair of DG Unlimited, which is a network organisation set up to connect, support and champion the region's creative sector. DGU is extremely pleased to be hosting the first of our Investment Ready webinars. These webinars form part of DGU's Creatives Unlimited one-year programme, which is funded by Creative Scotland, Dumfries and Galloway Council and the Hollywood Trust, to whom we are most grateful. Creatives Unlimited supports the professional development of the region's creative sector through a range of activities based around three key strands. One, growing leaders to develop confidence and professional skills. Two, growing ambition to stimulate artistic ambition and encourage creative development and creative risk-taking. And three, growing visibility, showcasing and advocating for the region's creative practitioners and organisations. And if you'd like more information and details about booking and links for our future events and workshops, please do look at our website, which is dgunlimited.com. Today, Maggie Brody is going to don her technical hat and will be managing the Q&A session. So mics will be muted during the presentation, and we ask you to add your questions to the chat box, and that's located at the bottom of your screen. So please include your name, and at the end of the presentation, your mic will be unmuted, and you'll get the opportunity to put your questions to our guest speaker. So today's subject is evidencing your impact, and our guest speaker is Helen Turner, who is Assistant Director at the Hollywood Trust. I'm sure known to many of us. Helen has been working with the Hollywood Trust for 18 years. Whilst being involved in assessing applications that come into the Trust, Helen also coordinates the reporting back by organisations who have received grant funding. Helen's background is in youth work, having worked for Dumfries YMCA and Dumfries and Galloway Council's Community Learning and Development Service before joining the Hollywood Trust. I know Helen gets a real kick from talking directly with organisations about their work and sharing what information she can that might help them in the work that they do, whether with young people or the community in general. So, Helen, thank you, and over to you.
Thank you, Kathy. Welcome, everyone. Nice to see you all. Gillian, that's fine that you've no camera. That's unfortunate, but great that you can hear us, and hopefully you can see the PowerPoint. I'm going to put a PowerPoint up. I am not accustomed to doing this, so hopefully it all goes fine. As Maggie said, if you've got any questions during it, use the chat, and if I've said something that's not clear, then do let Maggie know. Use the chat, and I can go over something and to clarify that. So I'm just going to share the screen so you can see the PowerPoint. So hopefully everyone can see that. Great, thank you, Maggie. So evidencing your impact. Obviously, that was for the Hollywood Trust, where we are getting reports from everybody, and it's a huge range of reports that we get in. Some are excellent at doing it, and some are still learning. So I'm just wanting to share some of that information with you. It's worked. So the areas I was asked to consider was outputs and outcomes, measuring the impact, and incorporating them into reports for funders. Excuse me. There's many different terminologies nowadays that are used. Aims, objectives, targets, inputs, outputs, outcomes, soft outcomes, hard outcomes, indicators. And sometimes people actually will do a table with columns with all those in them. It really depends how in depth you're wanting to go, and also where your funding's coming from, and what the requirements might be of that funder as to what depth you need to go to. Hollywood Trust, we actually look for, we say to people, give us something like 5 outcomes that we will monitor you against. Whereas if you were a local health board or a local authority, or even the Scottish Government, they really do ask for more. And an example is, the Council's priorities: build the local economy, provide the best start in life for our children, protect our most vulnerable people, be an inclusive council. So, say for example, you were applying to the council for funding for these sessions, you would link it to the first one, building the local economy, because of the arts and what that brings in. So that's a possibility, because these sessions are improving the life skills within the communities and the workforce, and also supporting small and medium-sized businesses to be established and grow. So in setting the outcomes, you would link into that, and you would possibly have a column that actually said, we refer to point such and such. And sometimes when you might see local authority, something like, well, the youth service, when they say they're delivering this, there's columns where what they are delivering links back into a strategy, whether it's the council strategy, the government strategy, or, if there's a special a project or a consultation. And that, so that's really, you need to do a lot of homework once you get to that level of knowing what to put in. In my session today, I'm really a bit more basic than that, but it is something to be aware of, that if you're going to the bigger funders, to be able to link it to, and even some of the higher powered lottery ones, because Awards for All are not looking for that. You can refer to it, but they wouldn't be looking at all that link. But if you were going for a huge capital grant, then it would. And particularly if you were going for an economic one, it's linking up there. But so an output. I have no idea your background, other than I can recognise some faces and that people are probably used to the term. But in simple terms, an output is a hard, tangible, can be counted, even seen thing, part. If you were a factory, your output would be the product. If you had a class of young people doing pottery and each person produced something, that's an output. Say if you took a festival such as Knit-Raid, the output would be the number of boats participating in the event, the preparation of the salty coo, the procession, maybe the provision of music, having 2,000, 4,000 people attend. You can just put clear count and state that's there. They're kind of hard outputs, you can count them. An outcome is again something that's achieved, but it's more about an impact. And you often talk about soft outcomes, and it's changes that has been caused due to your project, work or event. And it's so it can be a bit more difficult to capture. And going back to that example of the pottery class, so the outputs are easy to count, but do you know what people thought? Do you know the quality of it? Do you know, what impact it had on the people? So an output doesn't tend to give that sort of information. And that's the same with NITH-RAID. You could count all the activities, but you don't know the quality or impact it has on people. And so that's why an outcome can be that bit more difficult to grasp. And for us at the Hollywood Trust, that's why we talk about outcomes, because we are looking at what the impact is on young people. Now, I have found over the years, and it is changing, but sometimes in the arts sense, for some art funding, it is about the event happening. Or in sports, it's about there being classes. But we are finding that people are now enjoying talking about this, the outcomes, this wider impact of what the output has, and about how young people involved in putting on a festival, and them talking about what the change has been in them. And the festival organisers even saying, how it improved what they delivered because of the young people's input. It's not a tangible output, it's an outcome, because it's that softness and you gather by talking with people. So different sectors have the different terminology and they use it differently. And some going into more detail. One of the things I've picked up, in business terms, they'll be much more precise about what's an outcome and an output. And they turn, in business, an outcome is wants or needs that have been achieved. An output is the actions or items that contribute to achieving that. So it's a much more general rather than the softness that I've been talking about. But it's again, be clear about what your funder or where you're going is actually looking for and talking about and needing. And so that you're not talking about one thing and they're talking about another thing. The other thing is the depth to which you go with your outputs and outcomes depends on the funder. And that's what I've been saying earlier. Be sure what the funder is looking for. Hollywood Trust, we're not asking you to do a 20-page evaluation as a report. As anyone who's applied to Hollywood Trust, your final report is supposed to be 1 page. But the other thing in there, you would see, I've also got this part about your own evaluation. And that this process of gathering this information of evidencing your impact is not just for funders or just for a report, it's actually for yourselves and your own evaluation. And that is, it's so crucial, and that should be a major foundation on why you're evidencing what you're doing. And I'll probably come back to that as we move on. So, following on from this and outcomes, taking the pottery scenario. So, you've got people there and you can count the outputs. And that might be enough for you. But if you were wanting to know more, my example that I've put down is that during the first session, Jimmy struggles to engage with you as the tutor, doesn't listen to instructions, and nothing is working out for him. You can, so many of you who maybe have had that situation of working with someone and they're just not engaging, but then you manage to keep him to stay on the class, and by the 5th session, he's making something and starting to feel proud of making it. By the 10th session, he's entered a piece into a local competition and won the competition. So you can imagine how you're feeling. This is a person at the start you nearly gave up on. At the end, they've achieved. But so you have your subjective evaluation in which you should note that you've noticed that it is subjective, but you're the professional, and that is, you should note that you are noted that difference. But also, he comes up to you and is beaming from ear to ear and tells you that he nearly left after the first class, but is so pleased they didn't, and that he never thought of himself as an artist and of winning anything. Now that again is an outcome, and again that's evidence. And what I would be saying, I say to everybody all the time, you capture that, you record that. So you record your own observations and evaluation of what's happened, but you also record what Jimmy said, because that is evidence. The other thing is that his statement backs your statement up. And so, you know, if someone questioned you and say, oh, you're just saying that, you can say, no, here's what he said himself. So you corroborate each other in that. And it helps you also to capture that quality. Now, if you're not the tutor, but the tutor's reporting this to you, that also, if you are managing it, and this is where evidence helps you to manage and evaluate, it gives you an understanding that this person was really awkward at the start. The tutor stuck in there and helped them, and they achieved at the end. You know, it may be that the Jimmy says, you know, if it wasn't for you and the way you just gave me time, that way you know how well the tutor is also impacting on the whole class. They're taking someone that's difficult, and again, in that, so from managerial point of view, it gives you that evidence as well. The other thing within that, it's that, you know, that my example's 10 sessions, that the length of period may be longer. And also, for some of your work, you might be looking at how do you capture that over a few years. And that again is about, you know, capturing what you can under GDPR keep and not. And the key thing is what you agree with people that you're going to keep, what information. And so at the start, you need to decide, do you need to keep personal information? That is, do you need to know, you know, Jimmy's 15 at the moment. And so when he turns 25 and he's saying, oh, that class just turned the corner for me. And you want to refer back to that. Do you need to keep his name attached, and therefore he agrees that you can keep that? If he has agreed, then it's okay to keep that personal information. GDPR is about being upfront with people and storing information safely. It's not that we don't keep anything, but, and I'll refer to this again later, it's gathering and keeping the information that you need to, not everything. And that's a hard decision to make, because you don't know what you're going to need in 10 years' time. So that, so collecting the evidence. Outputs tends to be quite easy, relatively easy, I should say, because if you're doing a festival, how do you count the numbers of everyone who attends? There's something tangible there to be counted. The outcomes, it requires a bit more work and preparation and in the collecting. And so you need to decide what the outcome will look like and what the indicators would be if that was achieved. What I often use as an example is bookkeeping. You all have had to prepare annual accounts and send them to accountant to do the annual review. You have to attach and show the receipts or the letter saying they're giving you the money, evidencing why that money is being put into the bank or taken out of the bank. That's the same with outputs and outcomes. It's saving the evidence to prove that what you say is correct. And that's why I said earlier about recording your own evaluation of a situation, recording what an individual has said, that Jimmy has said. That also comes down to a negative. If Jimmy had said, oh, that tutor just couldn't stand them, they looked down on me, or, you know, that would also be evidence of why something didn't work. You know, at the moment I've been talking very positive, but, you know, evidence can help to explain why something didn't work as well as why it did work. And so, you know, the indicators, how do you know that Jimmy enjoyed it? You know, he tells us his positive attitude when he was in the class. You know, the attitude changed over the period of time. He was brimming from ear to ear. You know, that's an indication. And also, his skill level had, the statement of the class was to improve the skill level, pottery skill level of the individuals. At the start, he could do anything. At the end, he was making pieces. He was also winning. So he was, the quality of what he was doing was such that he won. So it's, you know, those, it's deciding what would be indicators. Another example I thought of was that, you know, you have a person attending, say, the Theatre Royal once a month to a session on a Saturday night. And every month they're there that Saturday night. Now, are they there because they enjoy it? Or is there another reason? So you can't assume that the reason they come every month is that they're enjoying it, because you don't know. They might be coming because they're a carer and who they're with wants to come and they have no option. But when you start speaking to them, if they start telling you that this is the only night that in the month that they can get along, they love the opportunity, it uplifts them, and as a result, when they go somewhere else, they start going to the theatre in other towns. So you now know he's choosing to come and that he's really getting involved. And he even may say that he joined the local drama club or whatever. So you're starting to get quality and depth into why. That also tells you that that Saturday night thing is fulfilling, at least for one person. The question is, how do you get that? Now, you could have staff that speak to people on that night, on the Saturday night, speaking to people. You could be asking people to do a quick questionnaire. Likes of Maggie Centres, 1 month of the year, they count their numbers and they ask people to fill in questionnaires. So they don't do it every month, don't do it every day, but they take 1 month a year and they then, and that's their statistics to find out who's coming from where and why. So it doesn't need to be that you're asking everybody or talking to everyone. There's no way you can talk to everybody, particularly if it's a big event. But it's working out what is the most suitable and is going to give you the information that you need. The other thing that we talk about, at the Trust, some of those who have been in touch with the Trust will hear us talking about SMART outcomes. So, and it is an in term for many funders, this, and that is that they should be specific. They're not hairy-fairy. So it's clear what the outcome is, that it's measurable, that, sometimes well, I'll come back to that later. You know, they use the term, you know, self-esteem. So how do you measure self-esteem? But that then brings in your indicators and what you decide on that. So as long as you've agreed indicators, self-esteem can be measured. But it's about, quite often it's putting a number on it. So at the Trust, someone will say that young people will volunteer with the festival, and we'll say, right, put a number on that. How many young people will volunteer? And so they'll then maybe say 10 that will be key volunteers. So which then means you can, when you go back to say, have you achieved it? There's a number, and it's quantifiable. Achievable. Sometimes people write trust and ask for 3-year funding, but perhaps the trustees only give 1 year. So we go back and we review the outcomes because they were 3 years outcomes and that are not achievable within 1 year. And it's saying, right, in a year, what is realistic to be achieved in that year? So they should be achievable, realistic. So holding a festival and saying we're going to have 200,000 people along to this festival. No, I don't think that's realistic within, generally within Dumfries. Hopefully at some point there might be possible. But, it's being realistic because it not only is it, it creates a kind of laughable thing, but you're putting an extra pressure on yourself. It's not realistic. You're asking yourself to do something that can't be achieved. And that can have such a negative impact on your morale and how the project, because you're, in a sense, you could be setting yourself up to fail. The other thing is time bound, that there's a time factor within that outcome so that it's not ongoing, so it never finishes. Now, it may be you reset the outcome, and that's fine, but that's making a choice to do it because you've evaluated that it still needs to go and keep going. So, those SMART targets often help us to be realistic in what we're looking at and doing. Right, indicators, like I mentioned earlier, well, I think I said it was soft outcomes, hard outcomes. This soft and hard can also be referred to the indicators. And so hard indicators are easy to count, but the softer ones are more subjective and harder to get that comprehensive proof of. So such as confidence and motivation challenges, feelings, at the well-being, feeling safe. You get one of the, I think the police or other folks, there is a point at which about being safe. So how do they, and they actually do a survey and ask people, do you feel safe in your community? And that is used to monitor whether their outcome, that people are feeling safer. So it depends on the indicator, what you're looking for. It will depend on how you're gathering that information. What I did is sometimes people struggle with this, and I'm not sure if you are or not. So I went to a youth work outcome because some of the youth work outcomes are these soft indicators, and it's about the person changing. So one of the outcomes for youth work is that young people participate safely and effectively in groups. So the indicators that they have set there are that they regularly attend a group, that the young people are recognising policies and practice that keep them safe, that young people resolve conflict peacefully with their peers, that they speak in a group and share their opinions, that they listen to other people's opinions, that they work with others on a group task, that they're supporting other young people within the group, that they shape the direction and progress of the group, and that they understand the role of power within groups. Now that ultimately is someone who really does understand group work when you get to that stage. But so, if someone was evaluating whether or not a young person was coping with being in a group, they could go to those indicators and say, well, they're attending regularly. They are recognising there's a hidden way of working in a group, and how to do it. But, you know, they don't, if there's a conflict, they're still aggressive with it. So they don't know how to deal with a conflict within the group. And yeah, they don't really listen to other people's opinions. And so you start to gauge where that young person is within that outcome. Now that's maybe your indicators within what you're doing, if it is soft outcomes that you're looking at and needing to do. And it may be that this relates in the arts, if you're teaching people skills as an artist, you know, either a performing artist or a visual artist, that there is, you know, even there's policies and practices that they need to understand within that. And, you know, if they are helping you to, as an intern, you know, what skills do they need, and do they have them at the start? If they don't have them at the start, how do you know that they've got them at the end? And it's identifying those indicators of the skills that you know by the end of the time with you that yes, they have learned and it's been a successful internship. So some of these might mean a lot of work to begin with, but once you've got them down, they're there for reference in the future. And it may be that you go to something like youth work and see what they've put down and plagiarise it. The majority of people are very happy that you plagiarise their stuff. So on to the gathering of the information. So how are you going to gather it? And again, I've said here, don't gather too much. I think as a society, we've gone through a process where we gathered everything and never used it. So it's about being clear what you need, what information is needed, and then how you're going to do it. And that's, and it may be that once you've got the information, you translate it into some kind of statistics that you can then use in years to come to say, last year, this is what we found, and this year it's this. But you don't keep all the questionnaires because you've translated it into figures and it's anonymized. Sometimes we find that people do consultations or questionnaires, and they've looked at them and they've gathered the underlying ethos of what's coming out of them, the impressions, but they don't actually write it up or save it in a kind of format that gives them that as evidence for the future. And it's a shame because they've lost that opportunity. Because that's information to use in the future. Say in 5 years' time, you suddenly say, we've really developed from when we did that survey. And someone says, oh, where's the write-up report? And you say, oh, I didn't do it. You've lost an opportunity to prove how the organisation has moved on or changed or achieved or something. Or if you're going round in circles, someone saying, we're back at the start. We need to question this, you know, that it's there. So consider different ways to get the information, and I'm coming to that, but also be willing to be prepared to be creative, but also realistic, and also be aware of the GDPR rules. So some methods, case studies, and I just, it's not quite a case study, it's a young person has given a statement to back up an application. So the organisation has said that we are impacting on young people. And so I said, can you ask one of the young people that's been with you a few years and just give me a statement? So this has come back. The most important skill I took away from being involved was the ability to communicate in almost any scenario. In my teenage years, I was one of the older and potentially wiser, and with this came leadership and responsibility. Being given opportunities to co-lead sessions resulted in the responsibility of preparing material, setting up equipment, and most importantly, teaching younger children. This trust I was given led me to be a more responsible young adult, and in turn made me strive to help more and give back to the community. The community which for so long I had benefited from, the community which supported me, and the community which was striving to do more. With this in mind, I used this volunteering opportunity to assist in the completion of my Duke of Edinburgh qualifications and achieving a worldwide volunteering award. And I was able to use these recognised qualifications to strengthen applications for jobs and further education. So in a case study, you would capture things like that. The reason I got that from a young person, for Hollywood Trust, we are about what impact has this had on a young person. And she's talked about in other parts right through her life how the whole community, it just made a difference and impacted her. A case study, you would talk about Jimmy with the pottery. He came in, he wasn't focused, he couldn't do it. You may even know more about Jimmy, that he's got a number of issues in his own life, and then at the end he achieved it. It shows how that activity comes together and makes a difference. So participants giving their input, that is a bit like that one I've written. If people keep journals, you can refer back to journals. There is questionnaires. And again with questionnaires, it depends what you want to end up with, if whether it's 2-3 questions or whether it's 20 questions, because you really need to get in depth what people are thinking and get the information. You could be using a flip chart and sticky dots. So on the flip chart, you've got agree, disagree, this was great, or it was okay, could have been better, or I would have preferred this or that, or yes, I am so much better at doing this, or I've still got more to achieve, and they put a dot against the one that applies to them, which is easy to do as people are walking away. And it's also means no one is picked out, they're not identifying themselves. Tokens into a bucket is very good as well, particularly if you've got a big group. You give everyone a token and you tell them to drop it in the bucket. And if you were working with some young people, it can be attractive, that kind of thing. There's a bit of creativity there. SurveyMonkey has become, most people can access SurveyMonkey. And if they can't, you could set up a system on a computer to do it, similarly, that they just went to a computer to do. Richter scale, I don't know if anyone's come across that. If someone is working one-to-one, Richter scale can be good. Can be quite expensive to get trained in it, but basically you have a board with 10 questions on it, and against each question there is a slide rule, and it's on a 1 to 10, and you ask the question, how are you feeling today? And the person would say, they would think, am I a 5 or am I a 10? 10's high, really happy. 1 would be really sad. So they might put a 5, or they might be putting a 1 or a 2. So you would have these 10 questions that relate to how you're working with them. You do it again either end of the month or in 3 months' time, and you ask the question, how are you feeling today? And they put a 6. So you actually note what the answer from session to session, and you would see that there's an improvement. But the other side of that, it can be a good tool to then say, oh, why is it you're feeling this way today? What's been going on? But and they might actually say, actually, I'm feeling a 7 now that we've talked about it. And you would go with your final score. So that, in one-to-one, that can be quite useful. But you can also use that in group work and say to the group, right, how was that session? What would we give? And they have to agree as a group what score they would give it. And that could also involve them discussing. So if you want to encourage them to come to a group decision, they're talking to someone saying, no, I didn't quite agree with that. And the others say, oh, well, let's put the outcome star, if you've seen it, you get if you think of a star with all the points, each point is a question. And again, it's a 1 to 5 or a 1 to 10, and they put a point, a mark at what point they're on the star point for that question. So same idea as Richter scale. The other thing is if you had press, articles, it's been in the paper, had something published, that's evidence. And again, when I said earlier about noting people's comments, if someone said to you when they're leaving, that was terrific, then, record it, and, if half the people have said it, then, you say, as people left, X number said to me how good it was. And then you can refer back to that because it's been recorded down. Another important thing when you're looking at knowing you've had impact is having a baseline. That is where you're starting from, so that if you've moved, you've moved. Sometimes that's already there because of statistics and information that you have. You're saying that you want to run more classes, so you already know how many classes you've run. So your baseline is what the number of classes you have at the moment. If you're saying we want people to improve their skills, you need to establish what skill level they're at that starting point, so that you can say they have improved their skill. So there may be a bit of work at the start to establish your baseline, but it might not. It depends what you need, what you're doing. If you've said this festival, we need to increase the numbers, and so one of our outcomes for next year is to increase the numbers by 50%, then if you've counted the numbers last year, then that's your baseline. If you've not, then you need to say, we think it was this amount, or you say, or instead of saying increase, your target is then to have 1,000 people at the event, because if you have no baseline, you can't say the word increase because you don't know what you're starting from. So you could just start with a new figure of what your target is. Recording the information, like I said before, make sure it's recorded, because then that is down. That's your receipt, that's your evidence. Keeping it accessible, informative. Don't know if you've ever gone back to something you've written and thought, oh, what did I write? Or what does that mean? And we all do it. We abbreviate things down and then we forget, because when we're writing it all makes sense. But so make sure that it's understandable and understandable by someone else in the future. And I've said there, don't trust the memory. Oh, I'll remember that. We don't. And again, I'm saying it's your own evidence. It's not just for funders. It's for so much else, this evidence. The other thing is that it is good, where possible, to anonymise it, so you're not putting names. Can be useful, to convert it into statistics. But again, there, be careful, because if you have 4 people attending and you say 75% of the people agreed, that sounds a lot. And 3 out of 4 did agree, but you did have 1 person who didn't agree. If you've only got 2 people attending and you say 50% of the people thought this, well, 50% thought no, once you know what the numbers were. And someone can think, if the percentages are crazy like that, then a funder will think, what else can I trust them? Because they're using numbers to put weight on what they're saying, but it actually doesn't mean much. So you're better just saying, yes, we had 2 people and the one thought yes and one thought no. It's not about not using the information, it's about the impact of how you use it. Because that might be to say, yeah, it's a 50-50 situation, but all the other information puts stuff, you know, evidence in there. So, and also it's about having a system of recording it in the one place so that you or who else in the organisation can return to it. And that's where writing it up is good, because that becomes that record, and you can have that to refer to for that. So reporting, again, like I said before, it's not your gathering of the information is a resource for yourselves as well. But then when you come to reporting, if you have that information, it does enable you to speak with certainty, confidence and purpose when you're talking to a funder, or in the sense of making an application, or if you were speaking publicly to say, this is how well we've done, and you can stand up in front of an opening session or an anniversary. Because you've got that evidence, you can speak with confidence and you don't need to speak in general terms. And then I've also said there in the last sentence, if things are not working out, the evidence and the thing, it can give you the facts and the information. You can speak purposely and understanding why it's not working out. And if you're reporting it's not working out, hopefully the information helps to give you an indication of why. So, you know, the pottery one, Jimmy really struggled in the first session. If he had then left, that information that he struggled, if he left after session 2 or 3, you would have noted that he struggled with it. And hopefully you would have evidence, having spoken with him, that he just couldn't do it and that that pottery wasn't for him. So that would be evidence that he left, it didn't work. But it's not, you can speak purposefully there, that he tried. So, you know, the evidence can be purposeful and allow you to speak purposefully. Sorry, I just need to double check my notes here. For the Hollywood Trust, when we are asking people to report, we look for statistics, and some of you have had that delight of trying to fill my table in. And then we're also looking for some details of what has been delivered. That is, if you said we were going to have a festival and it would have these sessions and people attending, yes, tell us that did happen. But what is key for the Hollywood Trust is the written reflective report that tells us what the impact has been, and particularly the impact on young people, and that it has achieved the outcomes. So, you know, if it was a festival, one of the outcomes was that the festival should happen, because that output needs to happen to get the outcome to happen of impacting on young people. And if you have gathered the information and reflected upon it and given it thought on the what next, we can see that in your report. And I'm sure that's the same with other funders as well. It's that being informed helps you to write the report. Well, actually, sometimes I have to say to people, stop, you're giving too much, because they get so enthusiastic when they start doing it. But that reflection, sometimes people just reflect on what's in their heads and they've not gathered the information. But when they have gathered the information and given us, that quality increases. And where gathering information and reflecting is natural to someone, they do find it easier. It may be if you're not used to reflecting, you need to just take time to practice that. Anyway, there was a sports project that we funded, and they sent back saying the number of young people, the number of sessions, the number of groups that they went and volunteered at, and that was all. And I wrote back saying, could you write more and tell us about the impact on the young people? And she did it, and she came back and said, thanks for asking me to do that. I enjoyed it. I said, I never get asked for that, but it was really good because I could think on what was done, and then enjoyed writing it. And that's the other side of doing a reflective report, whether it's for the trust or sitting reflecting on the information. It can encourage you and show what you're doing. The other thing is, if a case study can be helpful, because again, just like as we talked about before, and a statement from a young person. And sometimes we ask when people are reporting to us that the comments some people add the comments of young people that they've fed back, but also we ask if the young person can have an input into doing the report, which is not just their comments, it's their statement. And that can be useful because it captures what they are feeling from their perspective. You need to be aware of what the other funders are expecting. Sometimes they might use a table and with columns that you fill in against your outcomes, and where you put very brief comments, or they want you to go into greater detail than we at the Trust look for. But all of them are really looking that you've achieved those outcomes that have been set. And more, a majority of funders are outcome-based in their funding. The other point there, the last one that I've made, is the majority are not looking for a dry clinical statement, but one or two might look for that. So a Scottish Government might be looking for that dry clinical statement of statistics. So be aware of that. But I'm sure that even once you've done those sort of dry bit, a wee bit of human impact in there will also help to personalise it and show that impact. So, why are you evidencing your work? And I touched on this earlier. Yes, for funders. Evidence for your next funding application to whoever. As proof to someone else. Maybe there's your management committee. Just going into the council to say, yes, you've done this. Or, like I said before, maybe an anniversary that you're publicly promoting what's been done. But it should be more than this. Gathering your evidence should be for you to manage the work, to make informed decisions, give a clear picture of what's been achieved. And it will challenge you, it should challenge you, but also it should be an encouragement, because as you reflect on what you've done, you can see that what the good that you've done and the impact that it has been. Because often we're so busy watching and looking forward, and things can get very hard looking forward. It must have been a great time for Kathy to look back when she finally got the money for Peter Pan Moat Bray project. But at times it must have been hard just keeping going to get all that money in. So it's when you look back, you can say, yes, we've done well. And it's that reassurance as well in what you do. And it can be such an encouragement So if you are managing workers, do encourage them to reflect and look at the positive as well as the negative. You know, often we talk about reflecting to see what we change, but sometimes it's about acknowledging the good that's been done and what's been there. So that's me. I think I've been a bit longer than I was given, but hand back to Kathy or Maggie. I don't know. I think it's Kathy.
It's actually me this time. So whilst we wait for you to stop sharing your screen, Ellen, I will just say, wow, that is more than a whistle-stop tour of your experience. I'm just minded of the rhyme, you know, and still they gazed and their wonder grew that one small head could carry all she knew. I'm particularly taken by, you know, your last comment there, that actually looking back, I have been also in the thick of it, and it is such a boost to look back at your achievements. That's a really great point. Also that it's about you and helping you, not just about getting money. So we've actually there were a few questions from people who wanted to come but couldn't make it. So I'm just, whilst other folks gather their thoughts, perhaps just looking at so funders, and you've spoken about how different funders have different approaches and requirements. Some people are nervous about speaking to funders firsthand. What's your view on that before you even start the process?
I think the best bit of advice I ever got was from Fraser Faulkner, who used to be the head of BBC Children in Need in Scotland. And at a funding training session, he said, if a funder gives you a telephone number, use it, because that's why it's there, and speak to them. And also a chap from Sport Scotland at one of the funding roadshows, he was saying that, you know, do speak to us, because when your application comes in, it will not give it extra weight, but when it comes in, it'll twing a bell, and I'll have heard about it, and I'll have understood it, and it makes the process easier. So I would say definitely, and particularly if you find what you're going for, you're not sure if you fit into their criteria, and it allows you to explore it with them. And then something like the lottery, you might be thinking that this funding, but in actual fact it's another funding that applies, and so it's good to talk with them to do that.
Just there's another about like, is it possible, is it a good idea to speak to if you find that the things that your indicators, your outcomes are changing, there's issues, is it advisable to not just carry on and hope everything's okay, but maybe to check with your funder?
Yeah. If you're finding the outcomes are not, what you're delivering is not meeting the outcomes you're saying, definitely speak with the funder and discuss it with them. And because it's better being upfront, because if you get to the end and you've really moved off course with that, then they have a right to ask for the funding back, because you've not used it according to, you know, we finish up in our offer letter saying, you know, it's used for, and it's in the statements made, and all funders are saying that. And so, yeah. And that's the majority want that relationship with the organisations. Maybe, you know, a small one, I'm trying to think of an example, you know, so Association of Galloway, that giving you 1,000 or 2,000, generally you're not going to move much forward because it's very specific, but, you know, they maybe not worry, you know, as long as it's used for the very core purpose. But once you get into bigger money with, you know, organisations, yes, definitely speak as soon as possible.
Brilliant. Just one last is in terms of, and I know I've done this myself, about the costs of evaluating, you know, whether that be your time, should those be included in your budget?
Oh, yeah.
Applications.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Great.
The cost of doing it, yeah. But if staff have to give time to it, there's a cost there. And if you need to buy resources to do it, if you signed up to SurveyMonkey so you could do the more detailed SurveyMonkey facilities, that's a cost. And so you put that in against evaluation for that, yeah. Just be careful what you're putting in and don't go a professional.
Yeah. Fabulous. Well, thank you, Helen. Just also want to say we really value your time here. You've so much information to impart, but also it's been done, and you're reinforcing the fact that this is all about making a difference and helping our organisations to help the work that we do. So thank you, phenomenal. If anyone, you know, maybe wants to ask anything privately, then please message us, email us. We're happy to answer. Just a kind of reminder to you that we will be sending out, in the spirit of this monitoring and evaluation, we will send you a very brief feedback form. So please do respond and complete. We'll do that sometimes today. So just again, wonderful vote of thanks to Helen Turner. Marvellous.
You're welcome.
And now I'll just sort of come in there. Maggie, thank you very much for doing the technical stuff. And Helen, that was terrific. You know, what you and everybody at the Hollywood Trust has done for the young people of the region is phenomenal. So please continue to keep up the good work. And thank you for being quite so clear about the difference between outcomes and outputs. I still get confused, but it was really useful. So thank you very much. And really, thank you all for giving up your time and listening to this. Bill, Maura, Benny, and Jackie, thank you very much indeed. And we'll see you again, I hope. Okay, bye now. Maggie, thank you.
Thank you.